My name is Marin Vale. I'm 29 years old, and for nearly 2 years, my parents made sure I could not build a life without them. Every time I got close to a real job, someone got to the employer first and said I had a criminal record, or that I was unstable, or that I could not be trusted. None of it was true. I had never been arrested, I had never been charged with anything. But by the time I was 28, I was sleeping in a shelter in Belford, Ohio, trying to replace the documents my father kept from me, living on bad coffee and donated soup while every road back to work kept getting shut down. My father sent the same text over and over, like he was holding a door open to a cage. Come home. Apologize. We'll talk in the morning. I used to think the worst thing my parents could do was keep me close. I was wrong. The worst thing they could do was make sure I could not survive without them. Then, one cold night, after someone tried to put my bed at the shelter at risk too, I called the number on a card I had been carrying for days. The woman who answered did not ask who I was. She already knew. She said, "I've been waiting for you to be ready." And the next morning, she walked in carrying my grandmother's handwriting. I started working when I was 16. Grocery store shifts, diner weekends, holiday retail, whatever I could get. The money always went into a joint account my mother had opened for me because that was safer. That was the word she used, safer. When I talked about saving enough to move out one day, my father would lean back in his chair and say I was thinking like a child, not like someone who understood the real world. When guidance counselors mentioned college, scholarships, community college, even certificate programs, they got the same answer from him. Not practical, too expensive, not right for a girl who didn't know how hard life could turn if she got in over her head. By the summer of 2023, I was 26, still living in my childhood bedroom, still asking permission in ways that no longer looked like permission because I had practiced them for so long. I did not want a dramatic escape. I did not want a new life in California or New York or anywhere glamorous. I wanted a steady, full-time job in the next town over, a checking account nobody else could touch, and a door I could lock behind me at night. So I drove to the public library in Ashby one Thursday afternoon, opened a new email address on a public computer, and applied for a sales floor associate position at Ashby Hardware and Supply. 2 days later, Ray Donnelly called and asked if I could come in Monday morning. I remember everything about that drive. The way I kept checking the rearview mirror even though no one was following me. The clean blue shirt I had ironed on my bed with the blinds half shut. The feeling that maybe my whole life did not have to begin with a fight. Maybe it could begin with a store apron and a time card and my own set of house keys a few months later. Ray was kind in a practical way. He asked about register experience, customer service, lifting inventory, early shifts. I answered easily because none of that was hard. I had years of work behind me. It just never counted for much in my own house. Then he glanced down at a note beside my application and his face changed. "Is there anything in your background we should know about?" I blinked at him. "No, sir." He took off his glasses and rubbed between his eyes. "We got a call yesterday. Someone said you had a theft charge in your past." They sounded worried enough that I felt like I had to ask. The room went quiet in a way I still remember in my bones. Not loud quiet, just the kind where your body suddenly feels too heavy for the chair. "That is not true." Ray looked uncomfortable, almost apologetic. "I am not saying it is, but I cannot ignore something like that." I drove back to Briar Glen with both hands tight on the wheel, trying to decide if I was angry or embarrassed or just confused. Maybe someone mixed me up with another person. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was trying too hard to make everything in my life connect. My father was sitting on the porch when I pulled in, newspaper folded on his lap. My mother was inside, rinsing dishes that were already clean. "How was your day?" The question should have been ordinary. Instead, it made my stomach tighten. "Fine." "Good." I went upstairs, changed clothes, came back down for dinner, and said nothing. A week later, I applied for a part-time administrative position with the regional office of a grocery chain. Then I applied for a morning shift at Blue Maple Diner in Claremont Township. Both places got back to me quickly. Both places cooled within 48 hours. June Tarlow at the diner was the first person who gave me anything real. She called me just before dinner rush, voice low and careful. "Honey, I don't want you driving all the way back out here for nothing." "What happened?" "A woman called, said she knew your family, said you had problems with honesty when you felt pressured." I stood in my bedroom holding the phone so hard my hand hurt. Honesty under pressure. That was the kind of phrase my mother used, soft enough to sound responsible, sharp enough to do damage. After that, I started watching my own house like I was casing a stranger's. My mother knew too much. She asked offhand questions about places I had never mentioned. My father made little comments that landed too close to things he should not have known. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me feel like my life was leaking through the walls. One night, long after they had gone to bed, I slipped into my mother's sewing room looking for old bank papers. I pulled open the desk drawer, moved a tin of buttons, a stack of church bulletins, a paperback devotional, and found a dark blue notebook. Inside were dates, locations, notes in my mother's careful handwriting. Ashby Hardware and Supply, called. Blue Maple Diner, warned. Regional Grocery Office, email sent. Page after page, place after place, nearly 2 years of my life mapped out in blue ink and neat little check marks. I sat on the edge of my bed with that notebook in my lap and understood finally that my parents had not been worrying too much. They had been managing my future like a problem they intended to solve by force. And if they had tracked my jobs this carefully, then losing work was probably only the part I had managed to see. I did not sleep that night. I sat there until the sky went gray, the notebook still open across my knees, reading the same names over and over as if they might rearrange themselves into something less deliberate. By 7:30, my mother was in the kitchen cracking eggs into a bowl. My father was at the table with his coffee and the local paper folded beside him. The radio was on low. It could have been any weekday morning of my life, except for the blue notebook in my hands. I set it down in the middle of the table. My mother stopped whisking. Her eyes dropped to the cover first, then to my face. "What were you doing in my sewing room?" Not "good morning," not "what is that doing there," not even surprise. "You called them," I said. "Every place I applied. You wrote it down." My father reached over, pulled the notebook closer, and flipped it open with the same expression he might have used checking a hardware inventory sheet. "Lorraine," he said, "you left this out." She set the bowl down too hard. "I did not leave it out." She looked at me again. "You went through my private things." I felt something in me harden. "You told people I had a theft charge." Her mouth tightened. "I warned them that you were not ready." "That is not the same thing, and you know it." My father lifted his eyes to me then, calm and level. "Sit down, Marin." "No. You are emotional right now." I laughed once, short and ugly. "I am emotional because you have been ruining every chance I get to leave this house." My mother pressed her hand to her chest, offended in that practiced way she had. "Leave this house? Is that what you think this is? A prison?" I did not answer. I was watching my father, because the calmest one in the room was always the most dangerous. He folded his hands. "The world is not kind to women who think independence is the same thing as preparedness. If your mother and I stepped in, it was because someone had to." "Someone had to tell people I was a criminal?" "No one said you were a criminal," he said. "Ray did." Then Ray heard more than he needed to, my mother said quickly. I told the truth in a form adults understand, that you have poor judgment when you feel pressured, that you hide things, that you are impulsive. I stared at her. You told people not to trust me. I told people you were not ready. It was the same conversation in different clothes. That was what made it so sick. They never had to say the ugliest version out loud because they knew how to suggest it and let other people finish the sentence for them. I pointed at the page with June's name on it. You called the diner, you called the grocery office, you called Ashby Hardware. How many more? As many as it took, my father said. My mother looked at him, then at me, and tears filled her eyes so fast it would have been convincing if I had not spent my whole life watching her use them. We were trying to protect you. From what? From making the kind of mistakes you cannot undo, she said. From men who lie to you, bosses who use girls like you up and spit them out, places that would see you alone and know exactly how easy you are to corner. I am 28 and still not ready, my father said. The room went quiet. Even the radio seemed too loud. I said the thing I had been carrying around like a threat for weeks, maybe months. If you do not stop, I am going to the police. My father leaned back in his chair and almost smiled. And what exactly will you tell them? That your mother worried too much? That we offered opinions? That employers made their own decisions? You lied about me. We gave context, he said. There is a difference. Only to you. He shrugged once. The sheriff knows me. Half this town knows us. You walk in there with this, and what do you think they will hear? A frightened daughter? Or a grown woman sneaking through her mother's drawers because she cannot stand being told no? I hated that part, because he was good at it. He knew where the weak spots were in any argument. He knew how to make me hear my own life through someone else's ears, until I sounded unstable even to myself. My mother wiped under her eyes and tried one last softer angle. Marin, honey, if you would just slow down and listen, this would not have to be a fight. It already is. Then stop making it one, she said. Stay here, save your money. Let us help you make a real plan. A real plan, meaning one they approved, one they controlled, one that ended exactly where I already was. I looked at both of them and said it plainly. I am leaving. My mother went still. My father's expression did not change at all. With what money? He asked. I did not answer. I turned and went upstairs. My hands were shaking by the time I got my phone open. I pulled up the banking app and logged in on the first try. For a second, I saw the numbers blur because I thought I was entering the password wrong. Then the screen loaded. Available balance 0.00. I sat down so hard, the bed springs snapped under me. There had been money in that account. Not a fortune, but enough to get a room somewhere for a month if I stretched it. Enough to breathe. Enough to leave without begging. I opened the history. Internal transfer. Previous day. Nearly everything gone in one move. I went back downstairs so fast I nearly missed the last 2 steps. Where is it? My mother turned from the sink. Where is what? My money. She did not even pretend to not know. That account was not safe anymore. It was my paycheck. It was a joint account, my father said, and this household has carried you for years. I stared at him. You took every dollar I have? We moved it where it could not be wasted, my mother said. Wasted? On rent? On groceries? On getting out? I need my birth certificate and my social security card. My father stood then, slow and certain. No, those are mine. They are being kept somewhere secure until you are willing to act like an adult. I couldn't help it. I laughed again, louder this time. You are keeping my money and my documents while telling me I'm not adult enough to leave? He stepped closer. You are proving the point for me. I went back upstairs and started packing anyway. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, underwear, toothbrush, charger, the framed photo of my grandmother that had sat on my dresser for years. I left half my life behind because half my life had never really been mine. When I came down with the backpack, my mother was standing in the hallway. If you walk out like this, do not come back expecting things to be the same. My father was behind her, one hand on the trim, solid as a doorframe. Come back when you are ready to apologize. I pushed past them, opened the front door, and stepped into the cold. It was mid-February 2025, the kind of Ohio cold that goes straight through denim. I had $18 in my wallet, a phone at 14%, and no papers. I made it to the edge of the driveway before my phone buzzed. Come home, apologize, we will talk in the morning. I read it once and put the phone in my pocket. The gas station off the county road was the only place with light still on. I sat outside by the sidewall at first, then went inside to warm my hands near the coffee station until the clerk told me I could not loiter if I was not buying anything. I bought the cheapest thing I could find just to stay another 10 minutes. The woman working nights looked at me once, then looked away. I do not blame her for that. A young woman with a backpack and no car parked out front usually means trouble or heartbreak, and most people in a town like mine have learned not to ask which one. By the second time she saw me, I must have looked worse. She poured a small coffee into a paper cup and slid it toward me without a word. Then she tore the bottom half of an old receipt, turned it over, and wrote down an address. Belford Community Shelter. What is this? I asked. A place with beds, she said. She capped the pen and tucked it behind her ear. They open intake in the morning. Thank you. She nodded once. That was all. Belford was far enough that I could almost pretend Briar Glen did not exist. By the time I got there, I felt scraped hollow. My phone was nearly dead, my toes hurt. I had not slept, I had not eaten anything except a stale granola bar from my backpack. Belford Community Shelter sat in an old brick building behind a church parking lot. The front door was heavier than it looked. Inside smelled like industrial cleaner and canned soup. A woman with tired eyes and clipped dark hair sat behind the intake desk. Nina Brooks, according to the badge on her sweater. You looking for a bed? She asked. Yes. She slid a clipboard toward me. Fill out what you can. If you cannot fill it all out, leave it blank. I took the pen and stared at the form. Address, identification, emergency contact, employment. The blanks looked bigger than the page. Nina must have seen my face because she took the clipboard back after a minute and said, That's fine. We can work around missing pieces tonight. She handed me a folded towel, a small bar of soap, and a thin gray blanket. Bathroom is down the hall. Lights out at 10, coffee starts at 6. We do not ask for your life story on night 1. I looked at her. She had already moved to the next paper on her desk. Bed 12, she said. Get some sleep if you can. I found the bunk and sat on the lower mattress with my backpack in my lap. My whole body hurt with the effort of staying upright. I had no money, no documents, no job, and nowhere left in Briar Glen that still felt like mine. But for the first time since I was 16, I was in a room my parents couldn't walk into whenever they wanted. And that small fact was enough to keep me from breaking all the way apart. Morning at Belford Community Shelter started before the sun did. Pipes knocked in the walls, somebody coughed 2 bunks over, and a smell of old coffee reached the dorm before the lights came on. By 6, people were already moving with the quiet efficiency of those who knew exactly how much of themselves the day would take. I learned the building fast. The bathroom at the end of the hall had one stall door that never latched right. The better coffee was always in the second pot because Nina Brooks made that one herself after the volunteers left. The blanket I had been given was thin enough that I folded it in half under me and slept in my coat for the first week. Nina ran the place like someone who had long ago figured out that pity exhausted people faster than rules. She did not ask me what I had done to end up there. She did not ask if I was really telling the truth about my parents. She only told me when breakfast started, where the bus route stopped, and how to sign up for storage locker space if I did not want to keep my bag under the bunk. That kind of respect felt almost suspicious at first. Carol Fisk slept across from me for the better part of March. She was in her 60s with a smoker's voice and a habit of folding everything into neat squares, even the paper napkins from lunch. The first time she spoke more than 3 words to me, she was showing me how to roll shirts instead of stacking them. You lose less room that way. I watched her tuck the sleeves inward with practiced hands. Thanks, she shrugged. Been losing and making room most of my life. A few days later, we were unloading canned goods in the pantry when she looked at the labels without really seeing them and said, "Men call it taking care of you when they want your name off every account that matters." I glanced up. She slid a box onto the shelf. Then, when it all goes bad, they call your dependents proof you needed them all along. That stayed with me. My days settled into a rhythm I never would have chosen, but came to depend on. Coffee at 6, breakfast at 6:30, bus to Belford DMV or the county records office, or the library, shelter chores in exchange for extra meal vouchers, back by curfew. Repeat. At the DMV, I met Mila Ortiz at least 4 times in 3 weeks. She worked the counter with the flat patience of someone who had said the same sentence 10,000 times and no longer believed in softening it. Without a certified birth certificate and one more supporting document, I can't process the temporary ID. What counts as supporting? Utility bill, lease, official mail, court paperwork, government letter. I let out a small laugh before I could stop myself. So basically all the things people need an ID to get. Her expression barely changed. She looked at me over the edge of the screen, then lowered her voice half an inch. If county records gets your birth certificate to you first, bring it here and ask for me. That was Belford in miniature. Systems that could grind you down, and people inside them who were not exactly kind, but sometimes tried not to let the machine crush you if they could help you. I kept applying for jobs because if I stopped, then my parents had not just blocked me, they had trained me to quit. I tried Graceway Dental Group for a front desk opening. They called me in, liked my availability, said they would be in touch by Friday. Thursday afternoon, the tone changed. The office manager went formal on the phone in the way people do when they are trying to sound neutral while backing away. We've decided to move in a different direction. Can I ask why? Long pause. We received a document raising concerns. What kind of concerns? Employment concerns, she said, then corrected herself too quickly. We're just moving on. Tri-County Freight was worse because they almost hired me. Bo Kessler liked that I could work early shifts and had already done customer-facing jobs. He left me a voicemail saying he wanted to talk next steps. The next day, he called again, slower this time. "Marin, before we go further, I need to ask something awkward." "Okay. Has anyone ever described you as having trouble with honesty under pressure?" The exact phrase hit me like cold water. Not similar, exact. "No." He exhaled hard into the receiver. "I figured." "Figured what?" That somebody wanted me to hear those words. That was the first moment I stopped thinking my parents were improvising. They were repeating themselves. Same language, same poison, different mouths. June Tarlow admitted as much when I made the bus ride out to Blue Maple Diner one afternoon and caught her between lunch and dinner. "You still have that voicemail." "I do." "Can I hear it?" She wiped her hands on her apron and stared out the window first. Briar Glen and Claremont weren't far apart, but they were close enough that crossing one family in the wrong way could follow you around for years. "I don't want trouble, honey." "I know." Your mother sounded calm, too calm, like she'd practiced. June finally looked back at me. People don't warn strangers that neatly unless they've decided the story in advance. "Will you give it to a lawyer if I get one?" She did not answer right away, which was answer enough. "Maybe," she said, "if it gets that far." It got farther. By April of 2025, my father had started showing up at town council meetings in Briar Glen, not to talk about me by name. Men like him rarely needed names. He stood up in his good jacket and talked about young people who turned their backs on family, about how shelters were full because pride kept people from accepting help, about daughters who confused independence with self-destruction. My mother sat in the second row with a tissue in one hand and her eyes fixed on him like he was saying something noble. News traveled even when no one said your name, especially then. At a community lunch one Saturday, Sherry Cole from the church set her styrofoam cup down beside me and leaned in like she was offering mercy. "Sometimes going home is the brave thing." I looked at her. Sometimes leaving is the only thing keeping a person alive. She recoiled just enough to show I had broken the script she had prepared for me. Nina called me into her office 2 weeks later. She closed the door first, which she almost never did. "I got a call this morning," she said. Woman identified herself as a county social worker. My stomach dropped. "She claimed you have a documented history of violent instability and that you pose a risk to other residents." For a second, the room narrowed to the edge of her desk and the painted blue brick she used as a doorstop. "That isn't true." "I know." "How?" "Because county social workers don't call shelters and start gossiping about residents like they're swapping church rumors." I sat there, gripping the chair arms while my pulse thudded in my ears. Nina folded her hands. "I shut her down, but if someone keeps pushing this through the right channels, I need you to understand that it could become a problem for your bed here." My bed, my locker, my towel, my place in line for bad coffee and canned soup. They were still reaching for all of it. Then Nina said almost as an afterthought, "Remember that woman who came by asking for you a few weeks back?" I looked up. "I didn't give her anything," she said, "shelter policy, but she left a card." She opened a drawer and slid it across the desk. "Monica Greer, private investigator, Belford, Ohio." I turned it over once. No note, no handwriting, just the cardstock and a phone number that sat there like a dare. "Who is she?" Nina shook her head. "Don't know, but she didn't feel like trouble. She felt like someone waiting." I carried that card for 9 days, in my jeans pocket, then in my coat, then in the back sleeve of my library notebook. Every time I thought about throwing it out, I remembered my grandmother on the old porch years before the farm was sold, staring out past the fields and saying, "A locked door doesn't mean you've run out of road." At the time, I thought she was talking about weather, or age, or one of those old country sayings that only made sense to people who said them. Sitting on the edge of my bunk after Nina's warning, I understood she might have meant exactly what she said. That night, I walked out the side door of the shelter, stood under the security light with Monica Greer's card in one hand and my phone in the other, and dialed before I could change my mind. She picked up on the second ring. "Marin Vale." "Yes?" I've been waiting for you to be ready. The next morning, Monica Greer met me in the shelter lobby at 8 sharp, wearing a plain navy coat and carrying a weathered brown briefcase with a luggage tag tied to the handle. My grandmother's handwriting hit me before anything else did. For Marin, when she needs it. I stopped walking. Monica set the briefcase on the plastic table by the vending machines and rested one hand on top of it like she had carried that weight a long time. Your grandmother was specific, she said. I was not to bring this to you until I believed you were being cut off from your ability to support yourself, not until it was clear this was deliberate and ongoing. My mouth felt dry. How long have you been watching them? Not constantly, she said, intermittently, enough to establish a pattern, enough to know Eleanor Vale was right to be worried. Nina gave us the use of her office. The room smelled faintly like copier toner and old coffee. Monica waited until the door shut before she clicked open the brass latches. The first thing inside was an envelope with my name written across it in the same careful hand I remembered from birthday cards and recipe notes tucked into grocery bags. I broke the seal with fingers that did not feel like mine. Marin, if you are reading this, then the doors around you have started closing the way I prayed they never would. I am sorry for that. I am sorrier still that I could not stop Russell from becoming the man he chose to be. People like to call control concern when they need a prettier word for fear and possession. Do not mistake that word for love. Love does not narrow your life until gratitude is your only way to survive. If every door around you is locked, it does not mean the road has ended. It only means the people holding the keys want you to believe it has. I had to stop there. I pressed the heel of my hand against my mouth and looked down at the desk, because if I looked at Monica, I was going to come apart. Take your time, she said. I read the rest. Eleanor told me she had done what she could while she was alive, that she had put certain things in motion because she knew Russell well enough to understand that if he ever felt me pulling away, he would not let go cleanly. She did not tell me to forgive him. She did not tell me to go home. She told me to use what she had left to build a life no one could drag me back from. When I lowered the letter, Monica had already opened the second compartment in the briefcase. Folders, tabbed sections, printed emails, phone logs, screen captures, dates. There were 29 contacts I could prove, she said, sliding one page toward me. Calls, messages, or emails tied back either directly or circumstantially to the Vale household, enough to show a consistent pattern. Not every employer kept records, not everyone was willing to talk, but enough did. She laid out the pieces with almost clinical calm. A call log matching the day Ashby Hardware had backed off, a printed voicemail transcript from June Tarlow's phone, 4 separate fake warning documents sent to employers from anonymous addresses that traced back through household internet records and device use patterns to my parents' home. Notes from surveillance visits where Monica had seen my mother with the blue notebook open on the kitchen table. Dates that lined up with the transfers out of my account. Dates that lined up with my applications. I kept looking from the paperwork to my grandmother's letter and back again, like one of them had to be a dream, because both at once felt impossible. You knew, I said quietly. I knew enough to keep documenting, Monica said. Eleanor did not want guesses, she wanted evidence. Why did she think it would get this bad? Monica's face did not change. She was married to a controlling man for 40 years before she buried him. She recognized the structure. Your father wasn't inventing anything new. That hurt in a different place. I took the folder Monica had labeled Employment Timeline and started matching it against my own phone. Russell's texts, dates of interviews, the internal transfer that emptied my account, June's call, the exact phrase, trouble with honesty under pressure, appearing across two employers months apart. Once I started laying my life beside the evidence, it stopped feeling like a blur of humiliation and started looking like a case. That was the strangest part. Nothing in the paperwork changed what had happened to me, but it changed the shape of it. The chaos began to look organized. The doubt began to look manufactured. Monica closed the folders and pushed the briefcase back toward me. There's one more stop today. Lou Mercer's office sat above a pharmacy in downtown Belford. The carpet in the waiting room was older than I was, and the place smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. Lou himself was thin and precise, with silver hair and a tie clipped too neatly to his shirt. "Your grandmother expected you might need this before she hoped you ever would," he said, after checking my temporary ID and the certified birth certificate that had finally come through. He opened a file and turned it so I could see the numbers. The trust had been established in 2019. Conservative management. Government bonds, CDs, low-risk holdings. Current value, $286,000. I stared at the page. "She did not leave you wealth for status," Lou said. "She left you survivability." That was her word. Why keep it hidden? Because if she gave you access before you were truly free to use it, your parents would have found a way to fold it back into the household, he said. Eleanor was very clear on that point. When I stepped out of his office, the October air bit at my face, and I finally broke. Not the panicked crying I had done alone in bathroom stalls or under shelter blankets. Something quieter and more embarrassing because it felt like relief. I sat in my car in the parking lot with my grandmother's letter open in my lap and cried because someone in my family had understood the difference between loving me and owning me. By 2 that afternoon, I was in Dana Pierce's office. She listened without interrupting. She took the folders from Monica, then my phone when I offered it, then the notebook pages I had photographed before leaving Briar Glen. She was not warm in the way Nina was, or restrained in the way Monica was. She was sharp, focused, the kind of person who turned pain into structure. "This is not nothing," she said after nearly an hour. "This is potentially defamation per se if they knowingly implied criminal conduct that does not exist. It is also interference with prospective employment, but I need more than outrage if I'm going to hurt them where it counts." "What do you need?" "Witnesses who will actually speak, metadata confirmed, a complete timeline of each application, each withdrawal, each contact, every text your father sends from this moment forward, every call, every third-party message. If they keep touching your life, I want fingerprints." I nodded. She tapped the folder. "This is strong. It is not magic." "Good," I said. "I'm done waiting for magic." For the first time in months, something in her expression softened. "All right then, let's build it." Over the next 3 weeks, I helped her turn the mess of my life into a sequence someone in a courtroom could follow. I called June again. I called Ray Donnelly. I wrote out every job, every date, every drive to Ashby, Claremont Township, Belford. I forwarded old texts from Russell. Dana sent preservation letters. Monica verified what she could. Lou released enough trust funds to cover rent on a small extended stay place and retainers that would have once been unimaginable to me. Then, on a gray morning at the start of November 2025, Dana Pierce filed a civil case in Belford County Court. There was no dramatic music, no applause, no lightning strike over the courthouse, just a stamped copy placed in front of me on her desk, my name printed where it should have been all along, no longer inside my parents' version of the story. The first crack showed up 3 days later. Not in court, but at my parents' mailbox. Tom Beckett was out raking wet leaves from the strip between his driveway and the road when the process server pulled up to the Vale house. He did not need to hear the words to understand what he was watching. In a town like Briar Glen, a stranger in a dark coat walking up with a thick envelope was language everyone understood. By lunch, half the town knew my father had been served. My mother got hers in the grocery store parking lot outside Belford, between a cart return and a row of dented pickups. I only knew that because Evelyn Hart called Dana's office 2 days later to verify the filing before she ran a short piece in the county paper. It was not a headline meant to entertain. It simply stated that a civil complaint had been filed alleging false criminal accusations and interference with employment. That was enough. Public records do not shout. They sit there, plain and unflinching, while people decide whether they can bear to read them. Tom Beckett was one of the first who did. He stopped my father outside the post office and asked the question nobody in Briar Glen had ever asked him in public. "You really told people your daughter had a criminal record?" Russell did what he always did when a lie got too large to hold in one hand. He made it sound like concern. "I warned people she was unstable." Tom stood there for a second too long, and that pause did more damage than an argument ever could. At church, the shift was quieter. My mother still brought casseroles to the food pantry. She still folded bulletins and set out coffee urns. But women who had once reached for her elbow now found something else to do with their hands. Conversations shortened when she approached. The sympathy she knew how to pull from people thinned into something more complicated and much colder. She was losing the role she cared most about. Not wife, not mother, not volunteer, witness to her own goodness. My father tried to take the story back where he had always controlled it best, in a room full of people too polite to interrupt him. At the next Briar Glen council meeting, he signed up to speak under community concerns. Dana went with me. We sat in the third row while he walked to the podium in his good jacket, jaw set, voice heavy with the kind of practiced strain that had worked for him his entire life. He talked about family wounds, about outsiders turning private pain into public spectacle, about daughters who misread protection as cruelty. He did not say my name. He did not need to. Then Dana stood up. "The complaint is a public record," she said. "If anyone here wants facts instead of performance, the county clerk can provide them." That was all. No speech, no grand takedown, just one clean sentence that pulled the floor out from under his. The room did what rooms do when shame enters them. It went still. After that, the evidence began moving in ways that felt almost ordinary. June Tarlow gave Dana the old voicemail she had saved because something about my mother's tone had troubled her even then. Ray Donnelly confirmed the warning call that killed my interview at Ashby Hardware and Supply. Coraline Hayes provided a printed copy of the anonymous email that had raised concerns about hiring me. Bo Kessler told Dana the exact phrase that had stopped him from trusting his own instincts. Trouble with honesty under pressure. The same language, the same shape, different doors. That mattered. It turned my story from a grievance into a pattern. Dana petitioned for court-ordered no-contact restrictions based on the false reports, the continuing harassment, and the clear attempt to destabilize my housing and employment. The judge granted relief narrower than a movie would, wider than my father expected. No direct contact, no third-party pressure, no new reports to employers or housing providers, no messages sent through church friends, neighbors, or community volunteers. Russell lasted 6 days. The message came from a number I did not recognize. "You are destroying your own family." I did not answer. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Dana, and put my phone face down on the counter. By the next afternoon, Deputy Sean Keller had delivered a warning. One more violation, and the court would have grounds to tighten the order. That was the first time I understood something I wish I had learned years earlier. Some people do not stop because they are sorry. They stop because the room gets smaller. By February, the numbers were bad enough for them that even their lawyer stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. Dana never gave me the theatrical version of anything, but I could tell from the way she organized her files that the balance had shifted. Between witness statements, documented contacts, the fake warning materials, and the financial records, the case had become expensive to defend and ugly to explain. The resolution came the way many real things do, not with a slam of a gavel, but with pressure that left no good options. By early March 2026, the financial consequences were fixed. The effective amount tied to damages and costs landed around $92,000, and a lien attached to the house in Briarglen until the obligation was satisfied. The house had always been more than a house to my father. It was his evidence that he still ran something, his proof that everyone under that roof owed him shape, obedience, and gratitude. Watching that address become part of a legal file did not make me happy. It made me feel finished. They sold in late March. Not for much. Small towns do not preserve pride well once everybody has a file number to whisper about. By then, I was already gone. With help from the trust and more restraint than I would have imagined possible a year earlier, I rented a small apartment outside Columbus. Nothing glamorous, beige walls, cheap blinds, a kitchen just big enough for one person to chop vegetables without bumping a cabinet. I bought a used sedan with more miles than beauty. I opened a checking account with only my name on it. The first time the bank teller slid the card across the counter, I stared at it longer than necessary. Later that week, I went to a rescue center and came home with a thin tabby cat who inspected every corner of the apartment like she was conducting a safety audit. I named her Nell because Eleanor had already given me enough. A full name felt too heavy for such a small creature. My work at Mercer Estate and Trust started part-time and stayed that way for a while. I organized intake files, tracked dates, built timelines, scanned exhibits, and watered the plant by the front window when nobody else remembered. It was not a glamorous reinvention. It was work, honest work, mine. A few weeks later, a letter arrived with my mother's handwriting on the front. I knew before opening it that it would not contain the words I had once spent years hoping for. It did not. She wrote that too much pain had passed through the family. She wrote that nobody had handled things perfectly. She wrote that perhaps we should move past it and have dinner, quietly, like adults. Not, I lied about you. Not, I helped make you homeless. Not, I was wrong. Just move past it. I folded the letter back along its original crease and drove it to Dana's office the next morning. She read it once, looked up, and waited. I want to answer, I said. I just do not want to answer from the worst part of myself. Good, she said. Then we do it from the strongest part. The response was short. Denial does not include sabotaging someone's ability to live independently. Peace does not require renewed access. Do not contact me again. That night, I made pasta in my small kitchen, while Nell sat on the chair and watched me like she expected a performance. My keys were on the table. My phone was silent. No one knew my route home. No one could call my boss in the morning and replace me with a rumor. No one could hold my documents over my head and call that love. For a long time, I thought freedom would arrive like thunder, loud enough to make everyone who hurt me finally understand what they had done. It did not. It came as a lock turning under my own hand, a grocery receipt paid with my own card, a cat asleep in a room no one could send me out of, a life that no longer needed permission. If you have ever had to learn that freedom is not betrayal, leave me a line in the comments.